My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 28. 3 years ago, to cover the astronomical cost of my mother's experimental cancer treatment, I signed a unique marital contract with Vivian Monroe, the heiress to the Monroe Industries empire. The terms were spelled out in black and white. A 3-year marriage for $1 million. Separate rooms, separate beds. A public-facing couple, private strangers. After 3 years, we would go our separate ways. And now 1,095 days have passed. The last red circle on the wall calendar is stamped on today. At 6:00 p.m. sharp, wearing the simple gray apron she once casually remarked had a decent color, I placed the last dish, pan-seared scallops, on the dining room table. A 3-course meal, each component meticulously crafted to suit Vivian Monroe's demanding palate. At 7:05 p.m., the sound of the shower in the master bathroom tapered off. I had already drawn her bath, the water heated to a precise temperature. Her favorite lavender and chamomile essential oils were diffusing their calming scent into the air. A plush robe and a fresh set of silk pajamas were hanging neatly on the heated, fog-proof rack. At 7:37 p.m., Vivian emerged, blotting her wet hair with a towel. The sash of her robe was tied impeccably, just like the woman herself, always maintaining a perfect, calculated distance. In a humid haze, a faint pink blush colored her otherwise pale cheeks, but the look she gave me was as cool and distant as it had been for the past 1,000 nights. Shower first or dinner? I asked, my voice steady, betraying none of the finality of the evening. It was a ritual. I'd asked this question for 3 years. She always chose to shower first, claiming she couldn't stand to bring the grime of the outside world to the dinner table. She was scrolling through her iPhone, her eyes fixed on the screen. Shower. Everything was normal. I silently picked up her blazer from where she'd draped it over the back of the sofa. It was a tailored Chanel, smelling faintly of the damp autumn air from outside. I smoothed the minor wrinkles and hung it in the walk-in closet. The movements were automatic, etched into muscle memory over 3 years. While she was in the bathroom, I went back to the kitchen, quickly reheating the meal to ensure every dish was at its optimal temperature and texture the moment she sat down. The hands on the wall clock spun a silent half circle. Vivian walked out, water dripping from the ends of her hair onto the expensive Persian rug. She finally set her phone down and took her seat at the head of the table. I stood a few feet behind her, a silent, competent attendant. I caught our reflection in the dining room's floor-to-ceiling window, a woman eating with poised grace, a man standing in quiet observance. To any outsider, we were the picture of a devoted, affluent couple. Only I knew the truth. The table was 6 feet long, and the polished mahogany between us might as well have been a canyon. She ate quietly, her fork and knife making no sound against the porcelain plate. The only sounds in the vast room were the faint clicks of the clock and her delicate chewing. This silence was finally about to end. When she placed her utensils down and dabbed her lips with a linen napkin, I took a deep breath. From my pocket, I pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper. It was the final page of our contract, the termination and non-disclosure agreement. Ms. Monroe, I began, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet room. As per our agreement, the 3 years are up. This is the termination agreement. I've already signed it. Her hand froze, her fingers tightening around the napkin. She lifted her eyes to meet mine. Her gaze was deep, like a frozen lake, betraying no emotion beneath the surface. And, she said, her tone perfectly flat. And so, I try to keep my voice professional, as if closing any other business deal. Our contractual relationship is officially over. Thank you for your support these past 3 years. I'll be moved out by tomorrow. I recited the farewell speech I had practiced 100 times, but my heart hammered against my ribs. Flashes of the last 3 years, the rare moments of warmth from her that almost made me forget our arrangement, surged through my mind. She just stared at me, silent for a long moment. Her beautiful eyes narrowed slightly, then widened again, and for the first time, a crack appeared in her icy composure, revealing something unsettling and unfamiliar. Then, she let out a soft, airy laugh. She deliberately folded the napkin and placed it on the table. Ethan, she said my name, her voice so gentle it was almost sinister. Did you really think this was a contract you could start and stop whenever you pleased? I froze, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. What do you mean? It was written in black and white. I mean, she cut me off, rising slowly from her chair. The sash of her robe loosened as she moved, but she paid it no mind, closing the distance between us step by step. I've changed my mind. She stopped directly in front of me, so close I could smell the warm, clean scent of her skin mixed with something I'd never detected on her before, danger. The contract ends when I say it ends, she said, her voice a low murmur. She raised a hand, and her cool fingertips traced the line of my jaw, sending a shiver down my spine. And I'm not ready for it to end. I instinctively took a step back, my spine hitting the cold wall. Vivian, you can't do this. The contract is clear. Rules? She tilted her head, a smile playing on her lips that was beautiful but utterly chilling. It held a kind of condescending cruelty. Oh, Ethan, don't you understand yet? From the moment you signed your name and walked through that door, my rules became your rules. As she spoke, a series of heavy, metallic thuds echoed from the front entrance, like industrial locks engaging. My head snapped toward the sound, my blood running cold. I tried to push past her to see what was happening, but she was faster. She grabbed my wrist, her grip shockingly strong. Her nails dug into my skin, a strength that seemed impossible for her usually delicate, graceful demeanor. Don't waste your energy, she whispered, her lips almost brushing my ear. Her voice was soft, cold, and laced with a terrifying, obsessive madness. That's the new security system. The door is sealed, Ethan. You're not going anywhere. Sealed? My mind reeled, unable to process the word. Are you insane? Vivian, this is false imprisonment. I struggled against her, but she pinned me to the wall with surprising force. Illegal. She laughed again, a soft, breathy sound. Her other hand came up to cup my face, her eyes swirling with a possessive darkness I'd never seen before. You're my husband. We're just having a little marital spat. Who's going to question it? Husband, that was just a contract. Not to me. It hasn't been for a long time. Her gaze darkened, the intensity in her eyes making me tremble. For 3 years, you've taken care of me, Ethan. You've attended to my every need, catered to my every whim. You've turned me into someone who can't function without you. And now you think you could just walk away? There's no such thing as a free lunch in this world. She leaned closer, her warm breath on my neck, but her tone was as sharp as ice. Your body, your mind, your time. From now on, it all belongs to me. Do you understand? I stared at her in shock, at this woman who had become a complete stranger overnight. The cool, distant, perfectly composed Vivian Monroe I had known for 3 years had shattered, revealing a possessive, dangerously obsessed core. Was this the real her? The metallic sounds from the hallway stopped, replaced by the final, definitive click of a deadbolt. It was a sound that severed my connection to the outside world. An overwhelming sense of fear and unreality gripped me. I looked into her eyes, which burned with a feverish light, the light of absolute control and paranoid possession. She stroked my cheek, as if admiring a priceless artifact she had just reclaimed. A satisfied, bone-chilling smile spread across her face. Don't be afraid, she purred, her voice as sweet as poison. As long as you're a good boy and stay with me forever, I'll be very, very good to you. Better than anyone else in the world. She lowered her head, pressing a cold kiss to my collarbone. Welcome home, Ethan, she whispered in my ear, her tone a cruel mockery of tenderness. This time it's forever. The cold kiss on my collarbone was like a brand of ice, freezing my blood and searing my nerves. With a surge of adrenaline, I shoved her hard. In 3 years, I had never once been rough with her. Even when she came home, slightly drunk from business dinners, my movements had always been gentle, careful. But now, a terrifying sense of unreality and raw fear gave me a strength I didn't know I had. Vivian, caught off guard by my violent resistance, stumbled back a few steps. Her grip on my wrist loosened. The sash of her robe fell open completely, revealing the elegant lines of her collarbone and the pale skin of her chest, but she didn't seem to care. She just steadied herself and looked at me. Her eyes, normally so cool and calm, were now a swirling storm of dark emotions. There was surprise, a flicker of anger, but mostly a disturbing, almost manic excitement, as if my struggle, my defiance, was exactly what she wanted. Vivian, snap out of it. My voice was hoarse with shock and fury. I pressed myself against the cold wall, seeking a pathetic sliver of security. Look at what you're doing. This is kidnapping. It's a felony. Let me go. She watched me like a predator admiring its cornered, terrified prey. Slowly, gracefully, she retied the sash of her robe. Her movements so elegant you'd never believe she was the same person who had just shown such madness. The law. She repeated the words softly, a mocking smile on her lips. In here, Ethan, I am the law. She took a step toward me, and I tensed. But she stopped at the dining table, her long fingers gliding over the polished surface before landing on the termination agreement I had signed. She picked up the paper. Without even glancing at it, she began to tear it, slowly, deliberately, into tiny pieces. The white confetti drifted down, landing on the expensive rug, on the edges of the warm plates she had just eaten from, and on my frozen heart. That wasn't just paper. That was my ticket to freedom, earned with 3 years of patience. It was the starting line of the new life I had planned for myself. And just like that, it was gone, turned to nothing in her hands. You see, Ethan, she said, letting the last scrap fall from her fingertips. Her eyes were locked on mine, glowing with that terrifying obsession. The obstacle is gone. Now there's nothing left that can make you leave. You're a lunatic. I was shaking with rage, the words tumbling out. The word seemed to strike a nerve. The lazy, mocking expression vanished from her face, replaced by a cold, dark fury. A lunatic? She lunged toward me, moving with startling speed. Before I could react, she had my chin a vice-like grip, her cold fingers forcing my head up to look at her. Yes, I'm a lunatic. I've been a lunatic since the day you signed that contract. I've been a lunatic every time you cooked for me, every time you drew my bath, every time you took care of me so perfectly that I couldn't imagine living without it. You made me dependent on you, on your presence, on your warmth, and by then, I was already past the point of no return. Her voice wasn't loud. It was a trembling, venomous hiss, each word a poisoned icicle stabbing into my ears. You spoil me, Ethan. You turn me into a useless creature who can't survive without you. And now you want to just cut and run. Not a chance in hell. Her nails dug into my skin. The sharp pain, a stark reminder that this wasn't a nightmare. This was real. That wasn't affection. It was a contract. It was a job I was paid to do. I tried to make her see the insane leap of logic she was making. Vivian, listen to me. That $1 million, everything I did for you, it was just a transaction. Do you understand? A transaction. There were no feelings involved. I thought my words would shock her back to reality. Even for a second, I was wrong. It was like throwing gasoline on a raging fire. Her eyes instantly turned bloodshot, not the red of someone about to cry, but the primal, enraged red of a cornered animal. No feelings? She repeated, her voice suddenly sharp and shrill. You're telling me there were no feelings in the perfectly temperate bathwater every single night? No feelings in the meals cooked exactly to my tastes? No feelings in the glass of warm water and antacids you handed me without a word every time my ulcer acted up in the middle of the night? You're telling me 3 years ago, after my car crash, when you stayed at the hospital for 3 days straight without sleeping, that had no feelings in it either? She fired the questions at me, advancing with each one. I was speechless, my heart clenching painfully in my chest. All of that, it was just my sense of contractual duty and basic human decency. I was just playing the role of husband professionally. To avoid any complications or misunderstandings, I had been careful to keep my distance, to never cross a single line. I never imagined that what I saw as professionalism, she saw as affection. That was just part of the job. I finally managed to say, my voice dry. The job. She looked at me as if I'd told the world's cruelest joke. She released my chin and grabbed my wrist, her grip impossibly strong, and started dragging me toward the master bedroom. Vivian, let go of me. What are you doing? I struggled, but her strength was abnormal, fueled by a terrifying, obsessive conviction. She ignored my protests, pulling me into the master bedroom, the room I had lived next to for 3 years, but had never truly entered. Slam! She kicked the door shut behind us. She released me and strode to the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, yanking the final layer of blackout curtains closed. The room was plunged into darkness, save for a sliver of light from the hallway under the door. She turned, a silhouette against the blacked-out window, her eyes gleaming in the dark. "Fine, Ethan. You said it was a job." Her voice was unervingly clear and cold in the darkness. "Well, as of today, your job description has changed." She walked toward me, a phantom in the night. "Your new job," she purred, "is to stay here. Forever. By my side. Your eyes will only look at me. Your mind will only think of me and your body." She paused, her voice dropping to a strange, gentle whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. "Will only belong to me." I backed away until the back of my knees hit the bed, and I fell backward onto the soft mattress. What was she going to do? The thought had barely formed when I saw her produce something from the shadows. A pair of handcuffs. The metal glinted coldly in the dim light. My mind went completely blank. "Vivian, calm down, you can't do this." I tried to scramble off the bed, but she lunged, pinning me down with the full force of her body. She wasn't heavy, but in that moment, she felt like a mountain, crushing the air from my lungs, the weight not just physical, but a suffocating psychological pressure. "Can't I?" She was on top of me, her long hair falling around my face. It smelled of her usual shampoo, a crisp scent I once found pleasant, but which now made my stomach churn. "Don't you get it yet, Ethan?" Her hand, the one holding the cuffs, caressed my cheek. The cold metal sent a wave of goosebumps over my skin. "From the moment you walked through my door, you were mine. I was just foolish. I thought I could take it slow, that you would eventually want to stay." Her voice faltered, and for a second, I heard a note of pain, of vulnerability. "But you were going to leave. You were actually going to leave." Her tone hardened again. "So, I have to make you stay. My way." "No, don't," I thrashed, but she easily caught my wrist, yanking it toward the headboard. The cold metal ring snapped shut with a definitive click. My left wrist was locked to the solid, ornate frame of the bed. My freedom was gone. Despair washed over me like an icy tide. I lay on her massive bed, my left hand cuffed above my head like a sacrifice awaiting the altar. And she knelt beside me, looking down, her expression a bottomless swamp of madness, possession, anger, pain, and even a twisted kind of love. "Let me go. Please, Vivian, I'm begging you, let me go." My voice cracked, laced with a plea that I hated myself for. Fear had consumed everything else. She ignored my pleas, her fingers tracing the metal cuff on my wrist as if admiring her handiwork. "See? This is much better," she murmured, her eyes glazed over. "Now you can't run away. You'll always be here, with me." Her fingertips traveled from my wrist, up my arm, over my shoulder, and came to rest over my heart. Through the thin fabric of my shirt, I could feel their coldness, and I could feel my own heart hammering helplessly against my ribs. In here, she lifted her eyes to mine, her gaze pinning me down. Was there ever any room for me? I clenched my jaw and turned my head away, refusing to answer the absurd question. My silence seemed to enrage her again. She grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at her. "Answer me," she commanded, her voice sharp. "No." I bit out, the word fueled by my last shred of defiance. Not for a single second. It was the truth. At least before today, before I saw this monstrous side of her, I had honored the boundaries of our contract. I never had a single improper thought about her. To me, she was my employer, the untouchable heiress of the Monroe family. A woman I sometimes felt a flicker of pity for, but would never dare to desire. My answer was a knife, severing her last thread of sanity. The light in her eyes shattered, replaced by a pure, dark madness. "Good. That's just perfect." She began to laugh, a low, eerie sound thick with despair. "No, not for a second." She repeated the words, then lunged down. It wasn't a kiss. She opened her mouth and bit down, hard, on my shoulder. A sharp cry of pain was torn from my throat. The bite was vicious, as if she were trying to expel 3 years of delusion, of waiting, of pain, all at once. I could feel her teeth sink into my flesh, and the warmth of my own blood instantly soaking the fabric of my shirt. Pain and terror paralyzed me. After what felt like an eternity, she slowly released me. She lifted her head, a smear of crimson on her lips. She extended the tip of her tongue and slowly licked it away, a disturbingly sensual gesture that, on her beautiful, cold face, was grotesquely out of place. She looked at the bloody mark on my shoulder, a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes, followed by a flash of panic. But both were quickly consumed by a deeper obsession. It doesn't matter. If there wasn't, she panted, her voice raspy. Her tone was terrifyingly resolute. If not now, then later. If not in a year, then in 10. If not in 10, then for a lifetime. She leaned down close to my ear, her warm breath a mix of her scent and the faint smell of my blood. We have a lifetime, Ethan, and I'm going to make sure of that in here. Her cold fingers pressed against my heart again. Slowly, piece by piece, you'll have nothing but my name carved into you. With that, she stood up and walked to the door. She opened it, the hallway light silhouetting her slender but rigid frame. "Good night, my husband," she said without turning back, her voice returning to an eerie calm. "Get some rest. I'll see you tomorrow." Click. The bedroom door shut softly. Then came the distinct sound of a key turning in the lock from the outside. Once, twice. It wasn't just a door being locked. It was my entire future. I was left alone in the dark room, my left hand chained to her bed, my shoulder burning, the smell of my own blood in the air. Outside the window were the glittering lights of the city, the lights of a free world. And I was here, a prisoner in a gilded cage, a captive of her sick obsession. 3 years of my contract were over. My nightmare had just begun. The darkness was thick as ink, swallowing the lavish but cold bedroom hole. The metal cuff on my wrist was a constant, painful pressure, each slight movement bringing a fresh wave of stinging and the raw heat of chafed skin. My shoulder throbbed, a grim reminder that the horror of the previous hours was no dream, but a bloody, terrifying reality. I was lying on a bed soft enough to drown in, yet it felt like a bed of nails. Every muscle, every nerve was pulled taut, sleep an impossible luxury. Silence. A dead, suffocating silence, broken only by my own harsh, suppressed breathing and the frantic drumming of my heart against my ribs. The faint sound of a passing car from the street below felt like a transmission from another universe. The normal sounds of the city, which just yesterday represented my impending freedom, now felt like a cruel joke. I tried to reach the lock on my left wrist with my right hand, but my fingers scrabbled uselessly against the cold, smooth metal. The effort only made the cuff dig deeper. The headboard was solid, ornate steel, unyielding and indifferent to my struggle. Despair coiled around me like a vine, tightening its grip, squeezing the air from my lungs. "Vivian," I mouthed her name in the dark, the sound laced with terror, fury, and a profound confusion I couldn't begin to process. 3 years, over 1,000 days. I had played the part of the perfect husband. I knew all her preferences, knew about her ulcer, the exact temperature of her bathwater, the precise way to press each of her blazers. I had kept to my duties, never crossing the line. To avoid any potential misunderstandings, I had deliberately minimized eye contact, our conversations limited to the bare necessities of running the household. I thought my performance had been professional, the boundaries crystal clear. So why? Why had it come to this? Her face, twisted with manic obsession, her eyes glinting with a possessive fire, kept flashing in my mind, overlapping with the image of the cool, aloof, almost pathologically distant Vivian of the past 3 years. The two images shattered and reformed into a confusing mosaic I no longer recognized. She said I spoiled her. She said she couldn't live without me. She said she'd been insane since the day she signed the contract. The sheer absurdity of it all made me dizzy. Whose fault was this? Was my professionalism too convincing, sending her the wrong signals? Or was this obsessive madness always lurking beneath her surface, and I just happened to become the object of her fixation? Time crawled by in the suffocating darkness. After what felt like hours, just as exhaustion and despair began to blur my senses, I heard a sound. A faint, almost imperceptible footstep just outside the door. It was slow, quiet, as if someone was deliberately muffling their movements. It stopped right outside my room. My heart seized. My entire body went rigid. I held my breath. She hadn't left. She was right outside the door. The thought was a plunge into ice water. A moment of silence passed. Then I heard a soft, rustling sound like fabric sliding against the wooden door. It was a slow, quiet sound filled with a strange mixture of caution and greed. Was she sitting against the door? My mind painted a vivid, horrifying picture. Vivian, the woman who was always impeccably dressed in couture, now likely in her silk robe, curled up on the cold marble floor, her back pressed against the door that held me captive. What was she thinking? What was she listening for? Was she waiting to hear if I was asleep? If I was still struggling? Or was she simply feeling my presence, just a few inches of wood away? This silent, twisted vigil was more terrifying than any direct threat. I don't know how long she sat there. 10 minutes? An hour? Longer? I heard no other sound, but the feeling of being watched, of being guarded like a possession, was a palpable pressure that seeped through the heavy door, crushing the air from my lungs. Finally, the faint footsteps started again, slowly receding. She was gone, but my frayed nerves couldn't relax. Who was to say she wouldn't reappear, silent as a ghost? Who knew if her eyes were still watching me, somewhere in the dark? Sleep was impossible. I spent the night in a feverish state of terror, rage, and confusion, the pain in my wrist and shoulder a constant, grounding reality. The sky outside slowly shifted from inky black to a deep indigo, then to a bruised gray. When the first sliver of dawn squeezed through a gap in the heavy blackout curtains, I realized, with a jolt, that the night was over. Click! The lock on the bedroom door turned. I flinched like a startled animal, my cuffed hand instinctively jerking, sending a fresh spike of pain through my wrist. The door opened softly. Vivian entered. She had changed out of last night's robe and was now wearing a classic Chanel tweed suit, the skirt hemmed elegantly at the knee. Her long hair was pulled back into a flawless chignon, revealing the slender, pale column of her neck. She was even wearing light, tasteful makeup that concealed any evidence of a sleepless night. She looked exactly like she did on any other morning, the calm, poised, powerful CEO of Monroe Industries. If it weren't for the tray she was carrying and the humiliating sight of me chained to her bed, I would have thought last night's madness had been a terrible nightmare. Her calm gaze swept over me, over my cuffed wrist held awkwardly in the air, over my wrinkled shirt stained with dried blood. Her expression remained neutral, as if this were the most normal scene in the world. She walked to the bedside table and set down the tray. On it was a perfectly prepared breakfast, golden brown toast, a glass of warm milk, and a sunny-side-up egg. "Good morning, Ethan." Her voice was level, calm, and even held a note of gentleness that wasn't usually there. I stared at her, my lips cracked, my throat tight. I couldn't speak. The sleepless, torment-filled night had left my eyes bloodshot. She didn't seem to expect a reply. She sat down in the armchair nearby, crossed her legs gracefully, and began to butter a piece of toast. "You should eat something," she said, holding the toast toward my mouth. Her tone was so natural, as if I were merely sick in bed and she was thoughtfully taking care of me. The aroma of food wafted toward me, but it only made my stomach churn. I turned my head away sharply. "Get it away from me," I rasped, my voice raw with suppressed rage and disgust. Her hand froze. The air in the room grew heavy. I could feel her gaze on me, turning cold. After a few seconds of dead silence, she slowly withdrew her hand and placed the toast back on the plate. "Not hungry?" she asked. Her voice was still quiet, but now it held a dangerous undercurrent. "Vivian, do you find this amusing?" I turned back, my red-rimmed eyes glaring at her. Locking me up like a dog and then pretending to care. "What the hell do you want?" My outburst was met with a moment of silence. She picked up a napkin and carefully wiped her fingers, every movement maddeningly slow. "What do I want?" She finally looked at me, her beautiful eyes devoid of last night's manic energy, replaced by a colder, deeper, more terrifyingly calm obsession. Wasn't I clear enough? She stood and walked back to the bed, looming over me, her shadow falling across my face. "I want you to stay with me. Forever. So eat," she said, picking up the glass of milk and holding it to my lips. Her tone was no longer a suggestion. It was a command. Or would you prefer I find another way to feed you? I looked at the glass, at her slender but strong fingers wrapped around it, at the undisguised threat in her calm eyes. A wave of profound humiliation washed over me. I knew she would do it. After last night, I had no doubt she was capable of anything. We were locked in a silent standoff, the air crackling with tension. Finally, I broke. It wasn't submission. It was strategy. In my current state, completely powerless, defiance would get me nowhere. I needed to conserve my strength. I needed to wait for an opportunity. Slowly, painfully, I parted my dry lips. She watched the movement, and a flicker of something, satisfaction, passed through the depths of her eyes, so quickly I thought I might have imagined it. She carefully tilted the glass to my lips. Warm milk slid down my parched throat, offering physical relief, but filling me with an icy despair. I felt like a puppet, a soulless doll, as she fed me. She was meticulous, patient, even dabbing at the corner of my mouth with her thumb to wipe away a non-existent drip. Her touch was cold, and it sent a shudder through me every time. She seemed to relish the process, to savor the feeling of total control. When the milk and most of the food were gone, she set the glass down. Her gaze then fell to my injured shoulder. "Take off your shirt," she said suddenly. I stiffened, my eyes narrowing. "What do you want?" "I'm changing the dressing," she replied, producing a small first aid kit from seemingly nowhere. She opened it, revealing gauze, antiseptic, and ointment. An infection would be problematic. Her reasoning was flawless, almost considerate, but it felt twisted and terrifying. "I don't need your hypocritical charity," I snarled. Her eyes hardened. "Ethan, don't test my patience." Her voice dropped low. "You can take it off, or I can do it for you." Another choice that was no choice at all. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath to quell the rising tide of rage and humiliation. I knew resistance was futile. With my free right hand, I began to unbutton my shirt, my fingers trembling. As the buttons came undone, the bite mark on my shoulder was exposed. The skin around it was red and swollen, the teeth marks clearly visible beneath the dry blood. It looked brutal. Her gaze fixed on the wound, her expression instantly becoming complex. I saw a flash of pain, of regret, of madness, and of something else. An almost obsessive possessiveness. She reached out, her cold fingertips gently touching the swollen skin around the wound. I flinched, sucking in a sharp breath as pain shot through me. My reaction seemed to please her. Her fingers paused, then stroked the injury even more gently. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly. Her tone was so full of concern it made my skin crawl. Was this some kind of sick game? "What do you think?" I shot back with a cold sneer. She was silent for a moment. Then, she took a cotton swab with antiseptic and began to clean the wound with an unnerving gentleness. Her movements were skilled, precise, as if she had done this 100 times before. The sting of the antiseptic made me clench my jaw, but I refused to make a sound. After cleaning it, she applied a layer of ointment and carefully covered it with fresh gauze. Throughout the entire process, she was silent, her focus absolute, as if she were restoring a priceless piece of art. Her eyes never left the wound, a twisted fascination in her gaze. It was as if this mark, this injury she had inflicted, was some kind of cherished trophy. When she finished, she didn't move away. Her fingers lingered near my shoulder, her touch light as a feather. I could feel her breathing grow slightly heavier. The air in the room became charged, thick with a dangerous ambiguity. I remained perfectly still, every muscle tensed. Her gaze traveled from my shoulder, down my bare chest, and then slowly back up, settling on my lips. Her eyes darkened with an unmistakable, raw hunger. My heart hammered against my ribs. What? What was she going to do? Just as I thought she was going to lean in, she abruptly straightened up, turning her head away as she quickly packed up the first aid kit. Was that a faint blush on her ears? "I'll be working from home today," she said, her back to me. Her voice was back to its usual cool composure, though perhaps a little faster than normal. "What would you like for lunch? I'll make it for you." I didn't answer. She didn't seem to care. She picked up the kit and the breakfast tray and walked to the door. At the doorway, she paused but didn't turn back. "Ethan," her voice was a soft, clear whisper that cut through the silence. Try to get used to me being here, won't you? Just like I've gotten used to you. Then she opened the door and left. Click. The door was locked again. I was left on the rumpled bed, cuffed, half-dressed, the ghost of her cold touch and the medicinal smell of the ointment still on my skin. The air was thick with her scent and the suffocating weight of her obsession. I looked toward the sliver of bright morning sky visible through the curtains, but my heart was a cold, barren wasteland. Get used to her presence? Get used to being a prisoner, an object? No, never. My eyes scanned the luxurious prison, from the locked door to the chafed red mark on my wrist, and finally to the small, silver butter knife on the bedside table. The one she had used for the toast. Was it an oversight, or was it another test? Slowly, deliberately, my right hand began to move toward it. My fingertips were less than an inch from the cool, smooth handle of the silver butter knife. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, so loud I was sure it was echoing in the silent room. Blood rushed to my head, leaving me dizzy and cold. Was this a chance? Was this a deliberate flaw in her perfect prison, a test to see if I would behave? Or was it a genuine mistake? My eyes were glued to the small knife. It lay on the porcelain plate, catching the sliver of morning light from the window, a silent, dangerous temptation. My right hand trembled with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. If I could just get it, if I could just grab it, maybe I could pry open the damn cuffs, maybe I could use it as leverage, threaten her into letting me go. Even the worst-case scenario, having a weapon, any weapon, felt like it would give me a sliver of power, a tiny bit of agency in this insane reality. The primal instinct for survival and the desperate craving for freedom burned through my numb nerves like a wildfire. I could almost feel the solid weight of the handle in my palm. It would be the first piece of solid ground I'd held on since this nightmare began. Just as my fingers were about to brush against the cold metal. Click. The sound of the lock turning came without warning. My heart stopped. My hand shot back as if I'd been burned, a cold sweat breaking out across my entire body. The movement was so fast it stirred the air, nearly rustling the linen napkin next to the knife. The door swung open. Vivian was back. She was holding a clean men's shirt. It was crisp white, perfectly pressed, a stark and surreal contrast to her own expensive tweed suit. The meticulous jailer, bringing a fresh uniform for her disheveled prisoner. Her gaze landed on me first, sweeping over my cuffed wrist, my bare chest with its fresh dressing, and then flickered over my panicked face. Finally, her eyes settled on the breakfast tray on the bedside table. They settled on a knife, the one that had been just an inch from my grasp. Time froze. I held my breath, every muscle in my body rigid as stone. My mind raced, tried to invent a plausible explanation for my posture, for the intent that must have been written all over my face. Did she see? How would she react? Another terrifying explosion of madness? Or something worse? But she just looked at the knife, her expression unreadable. She regarded it as if it were just another piece of cutlery, no different from the plate or the glass. She didn't even look at it for more than a second. With a perfectly natural movement, she reached out, picked up the knife between two delicate fingers, placed it back on the tray, and then lifted the tray itself. The entire sequence was fluid, unhesitating, as if she had simply come back to clear the dishes and bring me a clean shirt. She placed a new shirt on the bed next to my hand. "Change into this. It's clean," she said, her tone as flat and ordinary as if she were discussing the weather. "The other one has blood on it. It can't be comfortable." I stared at her, my heart still pounding in my chest, the cold sweat now drenching the sheets beneath me. A profound sense of dread and the humiliation of being toyed with like a mouse in a cage made my throat tighten, and I couldn't speak. Did she know? Had she been waiting just outside the door, timing her entrance for the exact moment I was about to reach for a glimmer of hope, only to stride in and casually extinguish it? She looked down at me, her eyes deep and impenetrable, like a cold, dark well that reflected nothing but could swallow you whole. She said nothing. No accusations, no warnings, no threats. But that silent, absolute control was more terrifying than any outburst. She picked up the tray and turned to leave. This time, she paused at the door. She didn't look back, but her profile was framed in the doorway, shadowed and indistinct. "Ethan," her voice was a soft whisper, a feather stroking my raw nerves. Don't do anything foolish. If you hurt yourself, I'd be devastated. Then, she pulled the door open and stepped out. Click. The deadbolt slid home, the sound final and cruel, sealing me off in the world once more. I collapsed back onto the bed, all my strength gone, and gasped for air. My cuffed left wrist throbbed from the tension. The cold sweat dripped from my forehead into my eyes, stinging. She knew. She had to have known. It wasn't an oversight. It was a test. A sadistic game. She was showing me, in the cruelest way possible, that I was completely at her mercy. That my every move, my every desperate thought of resistance, was transparent to her. She was telling me not to bother struggling, that it was pathetic, and that it would only lead to worse consequences. I'd be devastated. Her soft words echoed in the silent room, coiling around my heart like a cold, venomous snake. Devastated? She wouldn't be devastated for me. She'd be devastated that her property had been damaged. A wave of helpless rage tore through me. I slammed my free hand down on the soft mattress with a muffled thud. Why? Why was this happening? I just wanted to pay my mother's medical bills. I just wanted to fulfill the contract. I just wanted to walk away quietly after 3 years and start my own life. What had I done to deserve this insane, terrifying fate? Rage and despair crashed against the walls of my chest with nowhere to go. I was a butterfly pinned to a board, every struggle only hastening my own destruction. The sun moved across the sky, the strip of light on the floor growing longer and warmer. Time was passing, but it had lost all meaning. I don't know how long I lay there, motionless, until my throat was painfully dry and my empty stomach began to ache. The primal needs for food and water were a cruel reminder that, even in this hell, my body continued to function. And the person in control of my survival knew that all too well. Around noon, the lock turned again. This time, I didn't even have the energy to look up. Vivian entered with a new tray. The meal was more substantial than breakfast, including a bowl of fragrant, steaming soup. She seemed to have finished her work for the morning, having changed into a comfortable cashmere lounge set that softened her sharp, corporate edges, making her look almost gentle. But her eyes were still cold, still filled with that silent, unyielding obsession. She placed a tray on the bedside table. Then, she did something unexpected. She took a small key from her pocket. My heart leaped. My eyes were instantly fixed on it. Was she letting me go? But she only used the key to unlock the cuff from my wrist. The other end remained securely fastened to the headboard. The moment the cold metal fell away, a wave of relief washed over my arm, followed by the stinging pain of the raw, red chafe mark it had left behind. I instinctively flexed my stiff wrist. Eat, she said, her tone clipped and authoritative. She placed a spoon in my right hand. Or would you rather I fed you? Her gaze flickered meaningfully to the angry red mark on my left wrist. The warning was clear. I gripped the spoon, my knuckles turning white. In silence, I began to eat. The food was delicious, even more refined than my own cooking. The soup was the perfect temperature, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. I was just chewing and swallowing. She sat in the armchair nearby, picking up a financial journal and reading quietly. Every so often, she would glance up to check on my progress. She didn't speak, didn't make any other sudden moves. She just sat with me. Or rather, she stood guard. This calm was more oppressive than last night's madness. It was the heavy, dead air after a storm, leaving you wondering when the next wave would hit. I ate quickly, desperate to end the suffocating ordeal. As soon as I set the spoon down, she put her journal aside. She stood up, took a warm, damp towel from the tray, and handed it to me to wipe my hands. Then, she picked up the small key. Just as I braced myself to be chained again, she slipped the key back into her pocket and began to clear the tray. She leaned close to me, the faint, clean scent of her hair invading my space again. My right hand was free, hanging at my side. And on that tray, there was a knife, a fork, a heavy ceramic plate. So many things that could be used as a makeshift weapon. My eyes darted to the cutlery. My heart began to pound again. Was this a chance? Another test. My fingers twitched. She seemed oblivious, her back mostly to me as she arranged the dishes, exposing the elegant, vulnerable line of her neck. If I move now, the thought was a devil's whisper. Just as my hand began to rise, instinctively, She suddenly turned her head, her gaze meeting mine with pinpoint accuracy. She froze. She didn't look at my hand. She looked directly into my eyes. And in her eyes, there was no surprise, no anger, no threat. There was only a deep, soul-crushing disappointment and sorrow. Yes, sorrow. It was so unexpected, so raw, that it stunned me into stillness. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft and trembling slightly. "Do you really want to hurt me that badly? Or hurt yourself just to get away from me?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Her sudden sadness was a needle, pricking me in a way I hadn't expected. She lowered her head and continued clearing the tray, her movements a little faster now, as if trying to hide her emotions. "I told you, I'm not going to hurt you," she murmured, as much to herself as to me. I can't let you leave." She carried the tray to the door. This time, she didn't leave right away. She stood with her back to me, her shoulders slumped in a rare display of vulnerability. "That suitcase," she said suddenly, her voice low. "I put it in the back of the storage room." My heart seized. That was my packed suitcase, ready for my departure. It contained all of my personal belongings from the last 3 years. Everything I owned in this house fit into one small bag. She had found it and put away. And she paused, her voice even quieter, almost a whisper. "Your mother." I had my foundation make another anonymous donation to her treatment fund. A substantial one. "You don't have to worry." Boom. The words hit me like a physical blow. I shot my head up, staring at her back in disbelief. What had she done? Using what excuse? What name? My mother. A wave of pure terror, far greater than anything I had felt before, washed over me. She hadn't just imprisoned me. She had extended her reach to the only family I had left. What was she doing? Was she threatening me with my mother's life? As if sensing my turmoil, she slowly turned around. The sorrow in her eyes was gone, replaced by that deep, familiar stillness. But the corners of her eyes were tinged with red. "Don't look at me like that," she said softly, her eyes holding mine. Her voice was laced with a complex exhaustion. "I won't do anything to her. The money is clean, the source is legitimate. It won't raise any suspicion. I just wanted you to have peace of mind." Peace of mind? How could I ever have peace of mind? This was worse than a direct threat. It was a complete infiltration of my life. She controlled my body, my freedom, and now, my only emotional vulnerability. She was showing me, in no uncertain terms, that I had nowhere to run. She held my gaze, her eyes pinning me to the spot. "So, Ethan," she said, her words slow and deliberate, "stop thinking about leaving. Inside and out, body and soul. You have nowhere else to go." Then, she opened the door and walked out. Click. The lock engaged. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed, my right hand still slightly raised, my blood turning to ice in my veins. Her last words were a venomous curse that echoed in the empty room, in my mind, refusing to fade. Inside and out, body and soul. You have nowhere else to go. My gaze drifted hopelessly around the gilded cage, to the raw red mark on my wrist, and finally to the patch of blue sky visible through the window, a sky I could see but never reach. A deep, soul-crushing chill spread out from the very center of my heart. The afternoon sun was bright, cutting sharp, clean lines of light through the gaps in the heavy curtains. In those beams, tiny dust motes danced and spun in a silent, endless ballet. Freedom felt so close, just on the other side of that light. And here I was, trapped in the luxurious shadows. The raw chafe mark on my left wrist a burning reminder of my cold, cruel reality. Vivian's parting words were a poisoned needle, replaying over and over in my mind. Inside and out, body and soul. You have nowhere else to go. Nowhere to go. She had even taken care of my mother. In my name. How could she? How dare she? Rage and a profound sense of powerlessness churned within me, threatening to burn away what was left of my sanity. But even stronger than the anger was a creeping, insidious panic. She knew everything about me, while I knew nothing about her true motives, her ultimate breaking point. Time crawled by in a dead silence. I didn't know what to expect next. Another manic episode, or more of this soul-crushing cold calm? As I sat there, My nerves stretched to the breaking point. The lock on the bedroom door turned again. My body tensed instantly, my eyes darting to the door. This time, it wasn't Vivian. It was two middle-aged women in neat, plain uniforms I had never seen before. They were pushing a small cart with cleaning supplies, their expressions placid and professional, as if entering a locked master suite to clean was the most normal thing in the world. They didn't give me, the man effectively imprisoned by the bed, so much as a second glance. They simply nodded curtly in my direction and then set to work with brisk efficiency, changing the linens, dusting surfaces, cleaning the bathroom. They were well trained, their movements precise and impersonal. I might as well have been a piece of furniture. This complete and utter dismissal, this normalization of my horrifying situation, with a unique and surreal form of humiliation. My existence, my predicament, was simply an accepted, unquestionable part of the household routine. What had Vivian told them? Mr. Cole is unwell and requires quiet rest? Or something more blunt? Watch him. Don't let him leave this room? Either possibility was chilling. The cleaning was finished quickly. They left as silently as they had arrived, leaving the room pristine and filled with the scent of fresh linen. But the fresh air did nothing to dispel the suffocating atmosphere of captivity. The door was locked again. I leaned back against the headboard and closed my eyes, overcome by a deep, bone-wearing exhaustion. Later that afternoon, the door opened again. This time, it was one of the household staff I recognized, the woman who prepared most of the meals. She came in carrying a tray with an elegant afternoon tea, scones, small cakes, and a pot of Earl Grey. When her eyes met mine, they flickered with something, pity, fear, before she quickly looked down. She set the tray on the bedside table without a word and hurried out. That momentary flash of connection, of shared understanding that this was not normal, was like a tiny matchstick struck in the darkness of my heart. It flared for a second, then died. Someone knew. The thought made my heart give a painful lurch. But the hope was immediately drowned by despair. So what if she knew? Who would dare to cross Vivian Monroe, the true master of this house, for a man trapped in a bizarre contract marriage? That fleeting moment of pity was powerless to change anything. The scones looked perfect. The tea smelled fragrant. I had no appetite. The sun began to set, stretching the beams of light across the floor into long, dusky orange stripes. I heard footsteps in the hall, the sharp, steady click of high heels on marble. Vivian, she was back. My heart began to race, my hands instinctively clenching the sheets. The lock turned and she entered. She had changed out of her loungewear and was now in a sharp, dark power suit. Her hair was once again pulled back flawlessly. She looked tired from a day's work, but carried herself with an air of complete control. Her gaze fell first to the untouched afternoon tea, her brow furrowing almost imperceptibly. Then she looked at me. "Not to your liking?" she asked, walking to the bed. She reached out to feel my forehead, a gesture so natural it was as if we truly were a loving couple. "Or are you not feeling well?" Her fingertips were cool against my skin, which was hot with anxiety. I flinched and pulled away. Her hand froze in midair. The atmosphere grew tense. She looked at her outstretched fingers, her eyes darkening for a moment before her expression smoothed over again, as if the flicker of annoyance had been a figment of my imagination. "I see. No appetite," she said, withdrawing her hand. Her tone was flat. "We'll wait for dinner, then." She didn't leave. Instead, she sat down on the edge of the bed, on the spot where I had been lying, far too close for comfort. The cool air she brought in from outside, mixed with her faint perfume, instantly colonizing the space around me. "How was your day?" she asked. Her tone was so mild, so conversational, like a wife asking her stay-at-home husband about his afternoon. The absurdity of it all made me want to laugh, but my throat was tight, choked with unspoken rage. My silence seemed to be what she expected. She didn't press, launching into a casual monologue about her day, as if we were just chatting. "We had a board meeting today. There's a snag in a new project launch, and a few of the old dinosaurs on the board are making noise again." She recounted the trivialities of her corporate life, her tone shifting from weary to sharp as she dissected the situation. She spoke so naturally, as if I were her closest confidant, the one person she could vent to. I listened, my body rigid, my heart feeling like it was being squeezed in a vice. What was this? Some kind of good cop, bad cop routine? Was she trying to paper over the reality of my imprisonment with this false domesticity? As she spoke, her voice trailed off. She turned her head, her gaze landing on the red chafe mark on my left wrist. In the dimming light, it looked angry and raw. She reached out, her fingertips tracing the mark with impossible gentleness. My body went rigid. I tried to pull my hand away, but she held it fast. Her touch was cool, but her movements were so careful, so full of a strange, tender sorrow. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly, her voice raspy. I didn't answer, clenching my jaw. She didn't ask again. She just stroked the raw skin with the pad of her thumb, over and over, her gaze fixated on it with an almost religious intensity. "It won't be like this anymore," she murmured, as if to herself. "As long as you're good, we can live a normal life, like a real husband and wife. Wouldn't that be nice? A real husband and wife." In this locked room, with my freedom completely stripped away, the bitter irony was suffocating. Her fingers traveled from my wrist up my forearm, sending a shiver through me. Her gaze followed, finally settling on the gauze taped to my shoulder. Her expression grew complex again, a mix of regret, pain, and that twisted possessiveness. "Is this still sore?" Her fingers hovered over the dressing, not quite touching. I met her question with a wall of silence. It was the only weapon I had left. My defiance finally broke through her calm facade. The feigned gentleness in her eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, stormy darkness. "Answer me," she commanded, her fingers tightening on my chin, forcing me to look at her. "Ethan, I'm talking to you." The pressure of her presence was immense. I could see the manic fire starting to dance in her eyes again. I knew that if I didn't say something, she would lose control again. "No." I forced the word out through gritted teeth. The two words seemed to placate her. The iciness in her eyes thawed slightly. Her grip on my chin relaxed, her thumb even stroking my skin in a soothing gesture. "Good," she said, sounding relieved. "I'll be gentler next time." Next time? There's going to be a next time? My heart sank. She seemed pleased with my brief moment of compliance. She leaned forward and pressed a feather-like kiss to my forehead. It was devoid of passion, but heavy with the chilling finality of ownership, of branding what was hers. "Good boy," she whispered, like she was praising a pet that had finally learned a trick. Then she stood up. "I'll have dinner brought up. We're having your favorite braised short ribs tonight," she said, as if the tense standoff had never happened. "I'll be back." She walked to the door and opened it. Just before she stepped out, she paused and looked back at me. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes were deep and knowing, cold with a complete and utter understanding of the situation. She dangled the small key to the handcuffs, which had reappeared in her hand. "Oh, and by the way," she said, her tone light and casual, as if discussing a trivial matter, "I think it's better if we use this at night. You're a restless sleeper. I wouldn't want you to fall out of bed." She gave me a faint smile that sent a chill from my scalp to my toes, then stepped out. Click. The door was locked. I sat alone in the room as it was consumed by twilight, the spot on my forehead where she'd kissed me feeling like it was burning. Her final, absurd excuse about my restless sleep was a cold file, slowly grating away the last shred of any hope that her gentler side was anything more than another form of torture. Dinner, a bath, and then what? The same cold, heavy chains, the same long, hopeless night. She was never going to let me go. Not an inch. Despair as dark and total as the night outside, closing around me, extinguishing the last of the light. #6 Twilight had fully surrendered tonight. The heavy curtains blocked out the city's glittering skyline, leaving only a single dim wall sconce to cast long, oppressive shadows across the room. The air was a strange, suffocating mixture of leftover dinner aromas and Vivian's cold, signature perfume. She was true to her word. Dinner was brought in by her, an even more elaborate meal than lunch. She sat nearby, watching me eat in silence, at one point casually remarking that the short ribs seemed a bit overdone tonight, as if we were any other couple sharing a meal. The whole time, The small, cold key to the handcuffs was a glinting presence in her hand, a constant reminder of the cruel truth beneath this domestic charade. I ate, the food tasteless in my mouth, mechanically swallowing just to get the torture over with. After the meal, she didn't leave. She brought out the first aid kit again, insisting on redressing the raw skin on my wrist and a bite mark on my shoulder. Her touch was still practiced and gentle, the sting of the antiseptic a familiar, minor pain. Her focus was absolute, her long lashes casting shadows on her cheeks, hiding whatever emotions might have been in her eyes. I sat rigidly, letting her do as she pleased. I had learned that resistance was not only futile, but likely to provoke something worse. When she finished, she packed away the kit, but didn't immediately reach for the handcuffs. She stood and walked to the window, her back to me, staring at the thick, sight-blocking curtains. The room was unnervingly quiet, the only sound the soft whisper of our breathing. "Go take a shower," she said suddenly, her voice flat. "I've already drawn the bath." I looked up, staring at her back in disbelief. A shower? She was letting me leave the bed, leave this cuffed corner of the room. The sheer surprise of it left me momentarily frozen. She turned around slowly, the dim light behind her obscuring her expression. "What?" she asked, her tone unreadable. "Do you need my help?" Her words were a bucket of ice water, dousing the tiny, foolish spark of hope that had ignited in my chest. I pushed myself to my feet, my legs, stiff from sitting and tension, nearly buckled under me. She stood motionless, watching me like a scientist observing a specimen. I steadied myself, and avoiding her gaze, walked stiffly toward the en-suite bathroom. Every step felt like I was walking on cotton, on eggshells. I could feel her eyes boring into my back, a cold, focused stare that made the hair on my neck stand up. The bathroom was steamy and filled with the scent of the same crisp, clean body wash and shampoo that I now associated with her. The tub was full, the water at a perfect temperature. A clean robe and pajamas were neatly folded on a rack. Everything was meticulously prepared, a testament to her thoroughness and her total control. I paused at the bathroom door, my hand hovering over the handle. "Do you need me to leave the door open for you?" Her voice drifted in from the bedroom, quiet but laced with an unmistakable, mocking challenge. My hand snapped back as if burned. Humiliation flooded me. I knew any attempt to create a barrier, to claim a shred of privacy, was pointless. It would only provoke her. I turned my back to the doorway and began to mechanically strip off my clothes. My fingers trembled with shame and anger, fumbling with the buttons. I could still feel her gaze on my back, a physical weight, a series of needles pricking my skin. The hot water should have been relaxing, but under her unseen watch, every inch of my skin felt exposed and tense. I washed as quickly as possible, desperate for the ordeal to end. After drying off and putting on the clean clothes, I took a deep breath and turned around. She was still there, of course, leaning against the wardrobe just outside the bathroom, idly playing with the key. Her eyes calmly swept over me from head to toe, like an inspector examining a piece of property that had just been cleaned. Her gaze held no lust, only a cool, complete, and assessing ownership that was far more unnerving. "Finished?" she asked, pushing herself off the wardrobe and walking toward me. I just nodded, my body rigid. She stopped in front of me and reached out, not to touch me, but to adjust the collar of my robe. The gesture was so casual, so proprietary. "Your hair is still wet." Her fingertips brushed the back of my neck, the brief, cool contact making me flinch. She noticed my tremor, and her hand paused. She looked at me, her gaze deepening, but she said nothing, simply withdrawing her hand. "Come on," she said, turning and walking toward the enormous bed. I knew what that meant. The brief reprieve was over. The prisoner's yard time had ended. It was time to return to my post. I followed her, each step as heavy as lead. She picked up the handcuffs from the bedside table, the metal glinting in the dim light. She looked at me, her eyes giving the silent command. Humiliation and rage boiled inside me, threatening to erupt. But then I looked into her calm, bottomless eyes, at the key dangling from her fingers, and all my defiance collapsed into hopeless despair. Slowly, painfully, I held out my left hand. The cold metal closed around my skin again. Click! The sound was the fall of a guillotine. My wrist was once again chained to the headboard. My world had shrunk back to a 3-foot radius. She seemed satisfied. She put the key away. Then, she did something I never expected. She didn't leave. She didn't go to her office. She pulled back the covers on the other side of the bed, and, under my shocked and disbelieving gaze, she got in. She lay down next to me. Her warmth, her scent, instantly filled the space beside me. My body went rigid, all the blood rushing to my head, leaving me cold and dizzy with panic. What? What was she doing? She seemed exhausted. She let out a soft sigh and closed her eyes. The warm light of the sconce softened the sharp angles of her face, masking the coldness and obsession, making her look almost gentle, vulnerable. I knew it was an illusion. She was right there within arm's reach. Her breathing was steady, but I was the one chained, helpless, barely daring to breathe for fear of disturbing the predator lying next to me. The minutes ticked by. The only sounds were our two distinct patterns of breathing and the frantic, silent pounding of my own heart. Had she actually fallen asleep? The thought was immediately dismissed. Impossible. This was another one of her games. I lay there, bored straight, staring at the shadowed ceiling, my nerves stretched to their absolute limit. After a long time, just as I was starting to feel delirious with tension and exhaustion, she moved. An arm, soft and tentative, draped itself over my waist. My whole body seized. I almost shot up, but the cuff and my own rational fear held me down. Her arm was light, not holding me, just resting there. The warmth of her palm seeped through the thin fabric of my robe. She didn't move further, didn't speak. It could have been an unconscious gesture made in sleep. But I knew she wasn't asleep. Her breathing had changed. She was testing me. Slowly, carefully, in a seemingly harmless way, she was pushing my boundaries. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to remain still, to make no sound. Silence was my only form of protest. My rigidity seemed to be what she expected. She didn't move her arm. A long time passed, so long that my tense muscles began to ache, and the spot on my side where her hand rested felt like it was on fire. Then, she let out a sigh, so quiet it was almost inaudible. A sigh filled with a strange, deep exhaustion. And it was that. Disappointment? I felt her shift, her body moving just slightly closer. Her forehead came to rest, gently, carefully against my shoulder, the uninjured one. It was a gesture of reliance, of seeking comfort. It was so utterly at odds with her actions, with the madness and the cruelty, that it left me completely stunned. My mind was a chaotic mess. What new form of torture was this? Was this the carrot to the stick of my imprisonment? A carrot wrapped in such a twisted, false pretense of intimacy. Her soft breath ghosted against my neck. My heart hammered, not with affection, but with a profound, disoriented terror. The person who had imprisoned me, who had hurt me, was now snuggled against me like a child seeking warmth. It was grotesque. It was twisted. I wanted to push her away, but my left hand was chained. I wanted to scream at her, but my throat was sealed shut. I could only lie there, a wooden effigy, as she leaned against me, feeling the warmth of her body, a warmth that felt more like a chilling poison. As I lay there, on the verge of breaking from the internal conflict, I felt her body give a small, shuddering tremor. Then on the skin of my neck, I felt a sudden warmth, a drop of moisture. I went completely still. Was that a tear? Was Vivian Monroe crying? The realization was a lightning strike, short-circuiting my brain, wiping out all thought. Why? Why was she crying? Out of frustration that I wasn't behaving? Or something else? There was no sound of sobbing, just the silent, steady fall of hot tears, one after another, scalding my skin, making my heart give a painful, violent lurch. The hand at my waist tightened its grip on my robe, her knuckles white, as if she were trying to hold back a tidal wave of emotion. The room was filled with the sound of her silent tears, her suppressed shudders, and the deafening beat of my own heart. All my anger, fear, and humiliation were suddenly overshadowed by a vast, disorienting confusion. This woman, this monster who had locked me away, what was hidden beneath her insane obsession? Were her tears real, or were they just another, more sophisticated, more devastating form of torture? I lay there a statue of flesh and bone, feeling the warmth on my neck, and for the first time, I felt something from my captor that was so complex, so terrifyingly ambiguous that I couldn't even begin to name it. A flicker of doubt, and that doubt scared me more than anything else. The damp warmth on my neck was like a drop of hot wax, scalding my skin and my frayed nerves. Vivian was crying, silently, desperately, her face buried in my shoulder. The shock of it momentarily eclipsed the fear and fury of my captivity. My mind went blank. All my senses narrowed to that small patch of fabric on my shoulder, growing colder as her tears soaked it, and to the trembling hand clutching the robe at my waist. Why? Why was she crying? Was it a performance designed to break down my defenses? Or was it real? And if it was real, what could possibly be the reason? Was she crying out of frustration? Remorse? My body was rigid, a block of ice. The cold, heavy handcuff on my wrist relentlessly dragged me back to reality, forming a sharp, stinging contrast to the fragile, quivering warmth leaning against my shoulder. Time stretched on, measured only by the silent fall of her tears. I don't know how long it lasted, minutes or an eternity. Her shudders gradually subsided. The tears stopped, but she didn't move away. She remained nestled against me, her forehead resting on my shoulder, her breathing evening out into a slow, steady rhythm, as if she had fallen asleep. The thought allowed a single, tense muscle in my body to relax before the rest seized up even tighter. Asleep? Impossible. Not after such an emotional storm. I held my breath and slowly, carefully turned my head, trying to see her face in the dim light of the wall sconce. The light was faint, carving her profile out of the shadows. Her long lashes rested on her cheeks. Her face, scrubbed clean of tears, looked calm, peaceful even, with a rare, unguarded softness. She looked, for all the world, like she was truly asleep. But a siren was blaring in my head. A predator is never more dangerous than when it appears to be resting. I remained frozen, barely breathing, terrified of waking her, of unleashing whatever might come next. Just as my muscles began to scream in protest from the prolonged tension, the hand at my waist moved. It wasn't pulling away. It was a subconscious exploration, her fingers tracing a light path across the fabric of my robe before settling again. This time a little closer, a little more firmly, her palm radiating a sleepy warmth. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was she asleep or not? I couldn't let myself think about it. The night passed in a state of hypervigilant torture. I couldn't sleep, couldn't relax. Every sense was tuned to the woman breathing steadily beside me, and to the hand resting on my waist, a constant, ambiguous presence. The sky outside the window finally began to lighten. As the first rays of dawn pierced the gap in the curtains, I felt her stir. Her breathing pattern changed. The hand at my waist gently withdrew. She was awake. My body instantly went back on high alert. My heart pounded, waiting. She sat up slowly, with her back to me, and rubbed her temples with the lazy elegance of someone just waking up. The sash of her silk robe was loose, revealing the elegant curve of her spine. She sat there for a few seconds, as if gathering herself, remembering where she was and who was with her. Then she turned and looked at me. Her face was once again a cool, distant mask. Last night's vulnerability, the tears, it was all gone, as if it had been a hallucination brought on by my own exhaustion and fear. Only her eyes seemed different, deeper somehow, swirling with complex emotions I couldn't decipher. Her gaze rested on my face for a moment, then dropped to my left wrist, still cuffed to the headboard. The red chafe mark seemed even angrier in the morning light. Her brow twitched, a flicker of something dark in her eyes. She didn't speak. She just reached for the key on the bedside table, leaned over, and unlocked the cuff. The cold metal fell away. My wrist, numb and stiff, throbbed with the pins and needles pain. I flexed it, still watching her, wary. She pocketed the key and stood up. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "What do you want for breakfast?" It was as if last night had never happened. As if the person who had cried herself to sleep on my shoulder was someone else entirely. This deliberate return to a cold, clinical normalcy was more unsettling than any confrontation. "Whatever," I said, my voice a dry rasp. She gave me a quick, unreadable glance, then disappeared into the bathroom. The sound of running water soon followed. I sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my sore wrist, watching the blurred outline of her figure through the frosted glass. My mind was in turmoil. Were the tears real? If they were a lie, she was a master manipulator. If they were real, why? Was it frustration at her inability to control me completely? Or was something else entirely? I realized with a sickening lurch that I was trying to psychoanalyze the madwoman who held me captive. The water stopped. She emerged in a fresh robe, her hair wet, her face softened by the steam, though her eyes remained as cold as ever. She picked up a hairdryer, but instead of using it on herself, she walked over and handed it to me. Then, she sat down on the rug at my feet, her back to me. The message was clear. I stood there, holding the hairdryer, stunned. What was this? A new kind of obedience test. What are you waiting for? Her voice, muffled by the sound of the fan, was impatient, commanding. You used to do this for me all the time. Used to? Yes. During the contract. It was one of my duties. On the rare occasions she couldn't be bothered to dry her own hair, I would do it. Back then, it was just a task, my movements mechanical, my mind elsewhere. But now, I looked at the vulnerable line of her neck, the dark strands of her wet hair. My fingers felt stiff as I switched on the dryer. The warm air and loud hum filled the space between us. My hands moved through her soft, cool hair, my motions clumsy with tension and reluctance. She sat perfectly still, cooperative, betraying no impatience. It was just another surreal moment in this twisted, forced domesticity. It was suffocating. Where her hair was dry, she stood up. Thank you, she said, her voice neutral. Then she walked into the closet to get dressed. I was left standing there, the warm hairdryer still in my hand, feeling like I had just woken from a bizarre dream. She brought breakfast in on a tray. While I ate, she sat nearby, coolly tapping away on her tablet, answering emails. She even took a business call, her voice crisp and professional. She had completely slipped back into her CEO persona, burying the manic, weeping woman of the night before. But every so often, she would glance up from her work, and in her eyes, I would see it, the cold, unwavering glint of possession. After breakfast, she didn't leave. She produced a brand new, shrink-wrapped laptop and set it in front of me. You can use this if you get bored, she said, tearing open the packaging and plugging it in. The Wi-Fi is on. You can look at whatever you want. I stared at her, utterly baffled. She locks me up, then gives me a tool to connect with the outside world. What was her game? Don't worry, she added, as if reading my mind. Her tone was flat. It's a clean machine. No spyware. I'm not that crude. She finished setting it up and pushed it toward me. The screen glowed to life, the familiar desktop appearing. A web browser icon was right there, prominent. A world of information. A lifeline. I could contact someone, anyone. The police. A friend. The temptation was immense, so powerful that for a second, I forgot everything, my fingers moving instinctively toward the trackpad. But I stopped, my hand hovering just above the surface. I looked up at her. She was watching me, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. Her eyes said it all. I knew you would. A chill shot on my spine. I understood. This was another test. A crueler one. A more psychologically devastating one. She was testing to see if I would actually try to get help. She was savoring the sight of my desperation, of hope dangled just out of my reach. She was showing me that even if she gave me the tools of freedom, I wouldn't dare use them, because I knew the consequences. And the consequences? My mother? Or something even worse? She had woven a web around me, and I was the helpless fly, caught and struggling in vain. I slowly pulled my hand back. My heart felt like it had been plunged into ice water. What's wrong? She asked, her feigned innocence laced with a subtle, cutting mockery. Don't you want to check the news? Or let your friends know you're okay. I stared at her, my lips pressed into a thin, white line. I couldn't speak. Seeing my tense expression, my withdrawn hand, she seemed satisfied. Well, if you don't want to, you don't have to, she said lightly, closing the laptop lid as if it were nothing more than a toy. She stood up, gathering her coat and bag, preparing to leave for the day. At the door, she paused, just as she had the day before. Oh, by the way, she said, turning back. Her tone was casual, as if she were mentioning a trivial household chore. "It's a nice day today. I'll have the staff open the balcony door this afternoon to air out the room." My pupils contracted. The balcony. The master bedroom had a large, open-air balcony. We were on the third floor, but below was a manicured lawn. She saw the look on my face. A small, cold smile touched her lips. I wouldn't get any ideas, though. Her voice dropped to a soft, menacing purr. "Even if you did manage to get down without breaking your neck." She paused, her gaze a scalpel, dissecting my last sliver of hope. "Where'd you run to, Ethan? Don't forget, you have nowhere else to go." Then she opened the door and left. Click. The lock engaged. I sat in the silent room, my eyes fixed on the glass door to the balcony. The sun was shining, making the doorframe glow. Freedom was right there, so close, so tempting. And she had laid that temptation at my feet, then smiled and told me, "You don't have the guts." I raised my fist and slammed it into the soft mattress. A feeling of absolute powerlessness, like a venomous vine, wrapped around me, tightening its grip, threatening to crush my very bones. She wasn't just imprisoning my body. She was systematically, cruelly destroying my will to resist. I was only just beginning to understand the true, hopeless depth of the abyss I had fallen into. Sunlight streamed through the glass doors, creating a pool of light on the carpet, so bright it was almost painful to look at. The dust motes dancing within it seemed to mock me with their chaotic, untethered freedom. The balcony door, it was a massive, glittering trap, laid bare for me to see. She hadn't even bothered to station a guard, just left me with the casual, "I'll have it opened this afternoon," a verbal bomb designed to shatter my composure. Could I escape? The thought was a weed, instantly taking root and choking out everything else. The third floor, not impossibly high. A lawn below. If I was lucky, maybe just a broken leg. Better than being caged here forever. A pet to be slowly domesticated until all hope was gone. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. Blood roared in my ears. My eyes were glued to the glass door. It was a gateway to salvation, or to a deeper circle of hell. Her words, cold and venomous, coiled around my neck. "Where'd you run to? Don't forget, you have nowhere else to go." My mother. The threat was always there, unspoken but potent. That donation. She had anticipated everything, blocked every escape route before I even knew I was in a maze. Rage and despair surged, a drowning tide. I shot up from the bed, so fast the room spun, black spots dancing in my vision. I stumbled to the glass door, my trembling hand pressing against the cool surface. The sky outside was a perfect, piercing blue. I could almost feel the breeze through the glass. So close, and yet a world away. I clenched my right hand into a fist, my nails digging into my palm, the sharp pain a desperate anchor against the impulse to smash the glass, to make a run for it. Consequences be damned. But what then? The sound would bring security. I would be dragged back, a pathetic, failed escapee, only to face a punishment worse than this. She knew I wouldn't dare. This was her game. She was enjoying this, watching me squirm, dangling the possibility of freedom just to watch the hope die in my eyes. Act. A strangled, guttural sound tore from my throat. I spun around and punched the wall hard. A dull thud echoed in the room. A sharp, explosive pain shot through my knuckles, which were instantly red and swelling. The physical pain was a welcome distraction from a mental torment. I slid down the wall to the floor, burying my face in my knees, my shoulders shaking uncontrollably. What do I do? What the hell am I supposed to do? Given, play the part of the devoted husband she wants in exchange for a slightly more comfortable imprisonment. And what? Live like this forever? Or fight back? With what? By risking my mother's safety. Every path led to a dead end. I sat there, locked in a state of agonizing indecision, as the sun arced across the sky. In the afternoon, the housekeeper came. Her face was a blank mask. She walked past me, unlocked the balcony door, and slid it open, leaving a gap wide enough for a person to slip through. The fresh air, smelling of cut grass and freedom, rushed in, stirring the curtains, stirring the dead water of my heart. She left without a word, locking the bedroom door behind her. Now, nothing stood between me and the outside world but a few feet of open air. The wind whispered through the gap, a constant, seductive invitation. I sat on the floor, motionless, paralyzed by the choice. I stared at the opening, at the railing of the balcony, at the impossibly green lawn below. Every cell in my body screamed, "Run! Now! This is your chance." But fear and reason were chains, heavier than any steel, rooting me to the spot. I remained there, in that state of silent torture, until the sun began to set, painting the sky, the open door, the world outside, in hues of orange and red. And then I heard it, the click of heels in the hall. She was back. My body jolted. I scrambled up from the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, my heart about to explode, my eyes still fixed on that open door. The lock turned. She stepped inside. Her gaze went immediately to the open balcony door, then slowly, deliberately moved to me. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes were like searchlights, scanning my face, looking for any sign of struggle, any residue of the torment I had just endured. I forced myself to meet her gaze, to keep my expression neutral, but my pounding heart and ragged breathing must have betrayed me. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she bent down, picked up a pillow I had knocked to the floor, and placed it back on the bed. She walked to the balcony door, but didn't close it. She stood there, her back to me, looking out at the sunset. The wind played with the loose strands of her hair. Her silhouette, framed by the warm light, looked almost lonely. "The air is nice out there, isn't it?" she asked, her voice soft, nearly lost in the breeze. I didn't answer. She didn't seem to expect me to. "You used to like standing under the ginkgo tree in the yard around this time," she continued, her voice distant. "You said the air smelled like leaves, that it was calming." My heart skipped a beat. She remembered that. It was a trivial detail from the beginning of our contract. I would sometimes stand out there while waiting for her to come home, a small ritual to decompress after a day of playing a part. It wasn't even a real preference, just a moment of peace. And she had noticed and remembered. She turned slowly, leaning against the doorframe, the setting sun backlighting her, obscuring her face in shadow. "Did you think about it today?" she asked, her voice devoid of emotion. "Jumping." My blood ran cold. She knew. Of course, she knew. She knew exactly what thoughts would go through my mind. I clenched my jaw, silent. My silence was all the answer she needed. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. "Third floor, onto the grass. If you were lucky, you'd probably just break a few bones," she analyzed, her tone as casual as if she were discussing a business plan. "If you were unlucky, you might injure your spine. And then, you'd never be able to move again." Her words were icicles, stabbing into my ears. "But that would be fine too," she said, her tone shifting, her eyes taking on that deep, obsessive glint. "In fact, that might be for the best. Then you'd really never be able to leave me. I could take care of you every day. Feed you, bathe you. Your whole world would shrink until it was only me." Her eyes glowed with a horrifying, ecstatic fervor as she described this monstrous future. The image she painted made my stomach churn. "You're a monster. A psycho." The words were a choked whisper. The crazed light in her eyes faded slightly, replaced by a deep, complex darkness. She walked toward me, stopping right in front of me. She reached out, her cold fingertips gently touching my swollen knuckles, the ones I had bloodied against the wall. Her touch was light, filled with a twisted tenderness. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly, the same question, the same tone as before. I tried to snatch my hand away, but she caught it. "Don't hurt yourself, Ethan," she said, her eyes boring into mine, her voice holding an almost pleading sincerity. "It hurts me." There was again that hypocritical, meaningless phrase. "It hurts you." I ripped my hand from her grasp, the dam of my control finally breaking. The fear, the rage, the despair of the day erupted. "What hurts you? That your property is damaged. What do you think I am, Vivian? A dog you can pet when you're in a good mood and chain up when you're not. A pet whose legs you want to break so it can never run away." My voice was a raw, broken shout. My eyes were burning, my chest heaving. She was stunned by my outburst, her mask of calm finally cracking. "That's not," she started to say, her voice faltering. "Not what?" I screamed, cutting her off. "Not false imprisonment. Not threatening me with my mother. Not watching my every move like some kind of stalker. What the hell do you want from me, Vivian?" What will it take for you to just let me go? I stood there, panting, the room silent except for my ragged breaths. Her face was pale in the fading light. Her eyes were a maelstrom of emotions, shock, hurt, anger, but most surprisingly, a profound, panicked helplessness, as if my explosion had completely derailed her script, shattering her delusion of control and exposing something raw and real underneath. We stood locked in a tense standoff, the air thick with the promise of violence. After a long, charged silence, she took a deep, shuddering breath. The confusion in her eyes was consumed by a darker, more desperate obsession. "What do I want?" She repeated my question, her voice a low, raw whisper, imbued with a terrible, final resolve. "Ethan, I just want to love you. I just can't be without you." The words were spoken slowly, with a trembling, desperate sincerity. Then, before I could react, she reached out, not for me, but for the buttons of her own blazer. She tore it open, the expensive fabric ripping, revealing the white silk blouse underneath. And there, over her heart, I could see the faint, white outline of a gauze dressing. A sick, twisted smile touched her lips as she saw the shock on my face. She grabbed my hand and, with surprising strength, forced my palm flat against her chest, against the dressing, against the spot where her heart was beating frantically. Through the thin layers of silk and cotton, I could feel it, the rough texture of the gauze, and beneath it, the raised, rigid shape of a scar. A fresh one. The shape. My mind went blank. She held my hand there, her eyes locked on mine, blazing with an emotion so intense it was terrifying. "Do you feel it?" Her voice was a ragged, hysterical sob. "Ethan, you've been in here for a long time. You've been in here for 3 years. So how can you ask me to let you go when I can't even let go of myself?" My palm was pressed against her chest. Beneath the silk of her blouse and the rough texture of the gauze, I could feel the distinct, raised outline of a scar. It was a vicious-looking thing, positioned directly over her heart. My mind felt like it had been hit with a sledgehammer. All the anger, the fear, the desperate shouts, it all evaporated, replaced by a vast, terrifying shock. 3 years ago. What happened 3 years ago? She was clutching my wrist, her grip like a vice, forcing my hand against the scar as if trying to burn its shape into my memory. Her whole body was trembling, not with fear, but with an explosive, on the verge of collapse, emotional intensity. Her eyes, usually so cold and obsessive, were now shattered pools of pain, madness, and a deep, soul-crushing despair. "You, what?" I couldn't form a coherent sentence. My throat was clogged with rust. My eyes were fixed on the scar hidden beneath her clothes, a silent, horrifying answer to a question I had never thought to ask. "What's wrong with me?" she asked, a broken, tragic smile on her face as fresh tears streamed from her eyes. It wasn't the silent weeping of the night before. This was a torrent. "Ethan, you must think I'm a complete lunatic, right? A monster who bought you and then locked you up for no reason? Aren't you?" The question died on my lips, silenced by the sight of her tears and the brutal reality of the scar under my hand. 3 years ago. Her voice was shaking so badly the words were barely intelligible. "It wasn't you who needed that $1 million. She took a ragged, sobbing breath. "It was me who needed you. I needed a reason to have you by my side that was legitimate, a reason that would keep you from looking at me like I was a freak." Boom. Another explosion in my mind, this one sending a tremor of ice through my entire body. She needed me. Legitimate. A freak. What the hell was going on? That car crash. She choked out, her other hand grabbing my arm, her grip desperate, like a drowning person clinging to a piece of driftwood. I wasn't saving some other person. I was the only one in the car. The only one. I stared at her, my mind reeling. The car crash that had been all over the news 3 years ago. The Monroe heiress, severely injured while saving a friend. It was all a lie. It was an accident. Or maybe it was what I deserved. She said, her smile turning tragic. My mental state back then was not good. I was driving, and I just lost focus. She closed her eyes, the tears tracing paths down her pale cheeks. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. The injuries were severe. Here. She pressed my hand harder against the scar. It was Very close. I almost died. And the first person I saw when I opened my eyes was you. Her tear-filled gaze met mine, but she seemed to be looking through me back 3 years to a sterile hospital room. You were asleep in the chair next to my bed, she whispered, her voice hazy with memory. Your face was pale, you looked exhausted, and you were clutching the side of my bedsheet. I thought you were a hallucination, something my mind conjured up before I died. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. I couldn't breathe. The memories flooded back, getting the call that my employer was in a near-fatal accident, rushing to the hospital, playing the part of the distraught husband, waiting outside the operating room, sitting by her bedside after she was stable. It was all part of the contract, part of the role I had to play. I had been exhausted, but I never imagined that from her perspective, it meant something else entirely. Then I found out you weren't a hallucination. You were my husband, she said, her laugh a broken, miserable sound. A husband I had bought with a contract. It's pathetic, isn't it? The one thing I wanted, I had to buy. Had a trap with a ridiculous contract. I was scared, Ethan. I was so scared. She was shaking violently now, her voice thick with a raw, desperate panic. I was afraid that if you knew the truth, you would see me as a burden, as a monster, and you would leave, just like everyone else. Everyone else? Who? My mind was a chaotic jumble of memories, of details from the last 3 years that I had never understood, that were now slotting into place with horrifying clarity. Her flashes of insecurity, her strange push-pull dynamic of relying on me while simultaneously keeping me at a distance. Her obsession with my schedule, my habits. Things I had written off as the eccentricities of a demanding employer now looked like something else entirely. So, the contract, which is a way to keep me here, my voice was a dry croak. And now that it's over, I gestured with my free hand to the chafe mark on my wrist. I didn't know what else to do, she cried, her composure completely gone. 3 years. 1,000 days. Every day, you were there. You cooked for me, you ran my bath, you knew everything about me. You were so good to me. So good that I let myself believe it was real. I got greedy. But the contract was ending. You were going to leave. Her voice rose, sharp with terror. I couldn't handle it. I can't imagine my life without you. The thought of it was a physical pain. So I had to. She looked at my wrist, her eyes a storm of agony and twisted love. I had to lock you up, make you mine and only mine, so you could never, ever leave me. As she spoke the words, she seemed to collapse under the weight of her own actions. Her grip on my hand loosened, and she fell against me, her arms wrapping around my waist, her face buried in my chest as she began to sob uncontrollably. It wasn't the silent, suppressed weeping of before. This was the raw, unrestrained grief of a terrified, wounded child. I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm so sorry. She mumbled incoherently into my shirt. I know I'm crazy. I know this is wrong. But I really, truly can't live without you. Please don't leave me. Please, don't abandon me. Her hot tears soaked through my shirt. The heat, the trembling, fragile body in my arms. It was a lightning strike that shattered my anger and fear, leaving behind a confusing, desolate landscape. So this was the source of it all. Not just a thirst for control, not just sadism, but love, a twisted, sick, and desperately real love. I stood there, a statue, as she clung to me and cried. My hands hung at my sides, my fingers cold and trembling. The truth of the last 3 years, the scar over her heart, the real emotions hidden behind her cold mask, it was a tidal wave, and I was drowning. I had always seen myself as an actor, a professional playing a part. I never realized that the sole member of my audience had fallen in love with the character, had become so lost in the play that she was willing to burn down the theater to keep it from ending. And I, the object of this terrifying, all-consuming affection, had been completely oblivious. I had been planning my escape. A complex, unnameable emotion churned in my chest. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. It was a profound, world-altering confusion. What do I do now? What can I do? Her sobs slowly subsided into ragged, hitching breaths. She was still holding on to me, as if I were the only thing keeping her from floating away. I looked down at the top of her head, at the strands of hair darkened by her tears. In that moment, she wasn't my captor. She wasn't a powerful CEO. She was just a deeply broken person who had used all the wrong methods to hold onto the one thing she thought could save her. Slowly, hesitantly, my right hand began to rise. It paused in the air for a long moment. Then, with a tremor I couldn't control, it came to rest on her shaking back. It was just a light touch, but the body in my arms went instantly still. The sobbing stopped. Slowly, incredulously, she lifted her head. Her eyes were red and swollen, her long lashes clumped together with tears. She looked at me with a fragile, disbelieving hope. I couldn't meet her gaze. My hand remained on her back, and I began to pat it, a clumsy, awkward gesture, like comforting a frightened child, even though I knew this child was a monster who had the power to destroy me. She didn't cry anymore. She just stared at me, her breathing still ragged, as if afraid to break the spell of this small, unhoped-for gesture of comfort. The room was silent except for the sound of our breathing. The last of the sunset had faded, plunging the room into darkness. And in that darkness, something was shifting, something fundamental and terrifying. The marriage that began with a contract and descended into a prison had just revealed its true, tragic, and horrifying nature. Darkness enveloped the room, with only the distant city lights painting faint, ghostly shapes on the walls. My hand was still on her back, the awkward, gentle pats feeling like an action disconnected from my conscious mind. She had stopped crying, but she was still looking up at me, her eyes wide and wet in the gloom. That usual storm of obsession and ice was gone, replaced by a fragile, tentative glimmer of disbelief. She seemed to be holding her breath, afraid that the slightest movement would shatter this fragile truce. The silence stretched, thick with the scent of dried tears and her cold perfume. We were frozen in that strange tableau. The captive and the captor, the judged and the judge, though I no longer knew which of us was which. I was the one to move first, letting my hand fall away from her back. Her expression flickered, the tiny light in her eyes extinguishing. Her lashes fluttered down, hiding her thoughts. But the arms around my waist didn't loosen. If anything, they tightened, a desperate, silent plea for me not to disappear. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, her voice thick and hoarse. I know that doesn't fix anything." I couldn't speak. My throat was raw. The rage and fear had been washed away by the torrent of her confession, but they had left a heavy sediment behind, shock, confusion, and a profound, suffocating weight in my chest. Could I blame her? From any rational standpoint, yes. Her actions were insane, criminal. She had imprisoned me, hurt me, threatened me. But if what she said was true, if the last 3 years had been built on that foundation of trauma and a desperate, twisted love, if the scar over her heart was a constant reminder of that, then what did that make me? I thought I was just an employee, an actor. But maybe, unknowingly, I had been a part of the mechanism that drove her deeper into her madness. The thought was chilling. "Get up," I finally managed to say, my voice a dry rasp. She flinched, then slowly, reluctantly, released me. She sank back, slumping onto the cold floor, her head bowed, her hair falling forward to hide her face. She looked not like a captor, but like a child awaiting punishment. I watched her for a moment, my mind a war of conflicting emotions. I slid down from the bed and sat on the floor as well, opposite her. A few feet of empty space separated us, a canyon carved by her obsession and my fear. The silence returned, no longer charged with defiance, but with a heavy, oppressive stillness. "The scar," I finally said, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. "How did it happen?" Her hands, which had been twisting in her lap, went still. "Surgery," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The shrapnel was too close to my heart. "During the emergency operation," she trailed off, but I could imagine the rest. "Why?" I paused, the question heavy. "Why lie and say you were saving someone else?" A bitter, self-mocking smile touched her lips. "It was good PR," she said. "The Monroe heiress, heroically injured while saving a friend. It's a much better story than the truth, that she was so messed up she drove her car off the road. And besides," she lifted her head, her tear-stained eyes pleading with me. If I had told you the truth, that I was a mess, that I couldn't even control my own mind, would you have signed the contract? Would you have stayed? I had no answer, because the answer was no. At the time, I needed money for my mother fast. I wouldn't have entangled myself with someone so unstable. She knew it. She had known it from the beginning. So she had built our entire relationship on a lie. These 3 years, I started trying to make sense of it all. I tried. She cut me off, desperate. I really did. I took my medication. I went to therapy. I tried so hard to be normal, to control the bad thoughts. I told myself, just 3 years. If you're with me for 3 years, maybe I would get better. Maybe I would be brave enough to tell you the truth. But I messed it up. Her voice broke, fresh tears falling onto the carpet. The closer we got to the end of the contract, the more scared I got. The more I lost control. I couldn't stand watching you mark off the days on the calendar. I couldn't stand it when I saw you had packed your suitcase. She trailed off into a choked sob. So my own preparations for freedom had been, for her, a countdown to abandonment. Each day, another turn of the screw on her fragile sanity. It was a twisted, sick kind of logic. But it was a logic. I leaned my head back against the bed and closed my eyes. The truth was a physical weight, crushing the air from my lungs. Could I hate her? After this, the anger felt unmoored. Could I forgive her? Impossible. The fear, the humiliation, the violation of my freedom. It was all real. The raw mark on my wrist was still throbbing. So where did that leave us? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. After a long time, her sobs subsided. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, taking a few deep breaths. Then I heard a soft, metallic clink. I opened my eyes. She was holding the small key. Her hand was trembling as she reached for my wrist, for the cuff that still dangled from the headboard, the one she'd relocked me into so many times. But this time, she unlocked it from the bed frame. Click! The heavy steel fell away. She placed the open cuffs and the key on the floor between us. A surrender. A relinquishment of her power. She looked at the raw mark on my wrist, her eyes filled with a fresh wave of pain and regret. Her fingers twitched, as if wanting to touch it, but she held back. "I'm sorry," she said again, her voice a ghost of a sound. She lifted her gaze to mine. Her eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted, stripped of all their madness, filled only with a weary, waiting despair. "Ethan," she whispered, my name a fragile thing on her lips. I'm letting you go. If you want to leave now." "The door is unlocked," she said, her gaze flicking toward the bedroom door, then dropping back to the floor. Her shoulders slumped, as if that sentence had taken the last of her strength. I won't stop you." Then she curled in on herself, burying her face in her knees, a small, broken shape in the darkness. She had let me go. After tearing herself open, after showing me the raw, bleeding wounds of her psyche, she was setting me free. She had placed the choice, the power, finally in my hands. Freedom. It was right there. All I had to do was stand up, walk to the door, and leave this gilded cage, leave this terrifying, tragic, broken woman behind. My eyes fell to the handcuffs on the floor, then to her trembling, huddled form, then to the red circle on my own wrist. "Go." A voice in my head screamed. "Get out. Forget all of this. Start over. You don't owe her anything. Her pain is not an excuse for what she did to you." My muscles tensed, ready to obey. But another image rose, unbidden. Her pale, unconscious face in the hospital bed 3 years ago. The flashes of desperate need I had sometimes seen in her eyes, hidden behind a mask of cold indifference. The scar over her heart. If I walk out that door, what will happen to her? My feet felt like they were nailed to the floor. The air in the room was thick, heavy. On one side, freedom. On the other, a woman who seemed on the verge of shattering completely. Time stretched, each second a new torment. Finally, I took a long, slow breath, trying to force down the chaos in my chest. I did not walk to the door. I did not look at her. I just sat there, leaning against the bed, staring out the window at the blurry, neon-washed sky. After a long, long time I spoke, my voice a tired, barely audible whisper. "Get up. The floor is cold." The huddled shape on the floor went rigid. Slowly, disbelievingly, she lifted her head, her red-rimmed eyes wide, as if she couldn't comprehend what I had just said. I didn't repeat myself. I kept my gaze fixed on the window, but in the heavy, silent air of the room, the taut string of despair, stretched to its breaking point, had just gone. Perceptibly. Slack. The night was far from over, and this twisted, painful story, I realized with a sinking heart, was far from its end.